All right, today we're talking about an Argentinian author who is doing something really special with the horror genre. Her name is Mariana Enriquez, and if you haven't heard of her, you're going to want to stick around. We're going to dive into why her stories don't just scare you, they get under your skin and just stay there. And look, don't just take my word for it. We're starting with a stark warning from Kelly Link, who is a master of fantasy and horror in her own right. This isn't just a blurb on the back of a book, you know? It's basically a heads up that what you're about to read is going to leave a mark. So, to really understand what makes her work tick, here's our game plan. We'll start with her reputation as the Queen of Terror. Then we'll get into the heavy stuff, how the reality of her country's history shaped her. We'll explore the very soil her stories grow from, dig into her obsessions with bodies and power, and finally, we'll tackle the big one, why her horror matters so much right now. Okay, first things first. Who is Mariana Enriquez? Well, people have started calling her the Queen of Terror, or the Queen of Latin American Gothic horror, and believe me, she has absolutely earned those titles. I mean, just look at this resume. She was a finalist for the International Booker Prize. She won Spain's Heralde Prize, which is a huge deal, putting her in the same company as legends like Roberto Bolaño. You've got giants like Kazuo Ishiguro and Paul Tremblay singing her praises. This isn't just some pulp horror writer. What she's doing is being recognized as world-class literature. And this, right here, this quote from Alan Moore, yeah, the guy who wrote Watchmen, he just nails it. He sees that for Enriquez, ghosts and monsters and all that supernatural stuff, it's not just for scares. It's the only language powerful enough to even begin to talk about the real-life, unspeakable horrors of her country's past. And that idea is so important. To really get Enriquez, you have to understand that writing horror wasn't some stylistic choice for her. It was a reflection of the world she was born into. It was her reality. This timeline says it all, really. She was born in 1973. Just 3 years later, a brutal military dictatorship takes power in Argentina. So her entire childhood, her formative years, were lived under a regime where people could just disappear, where you'd hear whispers of concentration camps in your own neighborhood. It was a world soaked in real, tangible fear. She said that her first real horror book wasn't by Stephen King. It was watching the televised trials of the military leaders after the dictatorship fell, listening to the testimonies of torture and murder. And her language for processing this couldn't be realism, because as a child, she didn't experience it realistically. She experienced it through rumors, silence, and a kid's imagination trying to piece together something awful. And this is fascinating. It's baked right into the language. In Spanish, desaparecer means to disappear, which became a political term for being abducted and killed by the state. But the word for a ghost appearing is apareció, literally one who appeared. So for Enriquez, ghosts are the ultimate act of defiance. They are the disappeared, returning, refusing to be erased. So if her horror is born from history, where does that history live? For Enriquez, it's not just in books or museums. It seeps up from the ground itself. This gets into a cool idea called psychogeography. Basically, it's the idea that places have memories, that a physical location, a polluted river, an abandoned building, a specific street corner, can hold the emotional weight of everything that happened there and actually affect how you feel and behave. And Enriquez tunes into this like a radio antenna. Now, this is where she makes a really important break from Argentinian literary tradition. The giant of their literature, Borges, often looked to Europe for his inspiration, Norse myths, ancient libraries, but Enriquez does the opposite. She digs into her own backyard. She finds her monsters in Argentina's local myths, its troubled history, its hunted landscapes. She embraces what she calls the down and dirty reality of her own country. And that down and dirty reality is this incredible, potent mix of influences. You've got indigenous legends, Afro-Brazilian religions that blended with Catholicism, folk saints like San La Muerte, the Lord of Death, and the ghosts of a complicated history of immigration and poverty. These are the stories that were always there in the streets, but were often ignored by serious literature. Okay, so we have this haunted landscape. Now who's walking around in it? Let's zoom in on 3 of her biggest obsessions: the body, the rich, and the poor. This chart breaks it down perfectly. For her, the human body is this site of absolute vulnerability. It gets sick, it decays, it bleeds. She's especially focused on the horrors of the female experience. Then you have the ultra-rich, who she sees as almost a different species, a nation unto themselves, obsessed with cheating death. And finally, there's the poor, who become the source of deep primal fear for the middle class, a constant reminder of how easily you can fall. And if you want to understand her take on the super wealthy, this line from her masterpiece, Our Share of Night, just says it all. For the characters in her book, being immoral isn't a flaw. It's proof of their power. It's a sign that they're above the rules that bind the rest of us. It's absolutely chilling. So, after dragging us through all this darkness, this decay, this dread, what's the point of it all? This gets us to the real mission behind her writing, and honestly, it's why I think she's one of the most important writers working today. I want you to think about a scene that, unfortunately, is pretty common in cities all around the world. It is a real, everyday horror. And because we see it so often, our brains, kind of to protect us, build up a callus. We learn to look away. We stop really seeing the horror of it, because if we did, we couldn't function. We normalize it. And here it is, in her own words. This is her goal. She uses the tools of genre, the ghosts, the cults, the supernatural dread, to shatter that numbness. She's trying to make us feel the horror of the real world again. She's trying to denormalize it. So here's how the magic trick works. She takes a real-world injustice that we've learned to ignore, and she wraps it in the language of a horror story. And by doing that, she hijacks our brains. She makes us feel that primal fear and disgust that the situation actually deserves. She gives the horror back its power. And that, in the end, is the question her fiction leaves you with. A question that sticks with you long after you finish the book. It forces you to look at your own world, your own street, and ask, what have I stopped seeing? What horrors have I learned to live with?